I've driven Route 9 between work and home for going on 6 years. Same 40-minute stretch of road, same sequence of towns I've learned to stop seeing. I do it mostly at night. I run the 3 p.m. to midnight shift at a logistics hub, so I know that road in the dark better than I know it in daylight. Know where the deer cross, where the fog sits in the low sections, where the old guardrail is patched with mismatched metal. The bridge over the Carver River sits at mile marker 34. 2-lane span, maybe 200 feet across, built in the late 60s. Old but maintained. I'd crossed it 1,000 times without thinking about it. I was about 100 yards from the bridge on a Tuesday night in early November when my headlights caught something on the east tower of the span. Something large, perched on the steel arch above the road. I slowed without deciding to. Reflex, the way you slow when something's wrong before your brain has caught up to your body. It was enormous. 12, maybe 15 feet of wingspan folded against a frame that was otherwise vaguely human. Bipedal, upright, head roughly where a head should be. The body was dark, absorbing the headlight beam rather than catching it. And the eyes. 2 fixed points of red light, not reflecting like an animal's eyes in a beam. Self-luminous, their own source. Aimed directly at my car as I slowed. I crossed the bridge at 15 miles an hour, watching it the whole way. It didn't move, didn't spread those wings or shift its weight, just tracked my car as I passed beneath it. I drove the rest of the way home without stopping. I saw it again on Thursday. Same tower, same posture, same red eyes turning as I crossed. I pulled over on the far side and looked back through my rear window for 5 minutes. Still there when I drove away. I called the county road department the next morning, said there was a large animal on the bridge structure that might be a hazard. Didn't say what I'd actually seen. The woman on the phone said she'd note it. Nobody called back. Saturday morning I was supposed to cross that bridge at 7:15 a.m. on my way to cover a half shift. I got into the truck and realized I'd left my phone inside. Went back for it. By the time I reached the first stretch of Route 9, the radio was already reporting an incident at mile marker 34. A section of the old deck had given way, the eastbound lane, directly below where the thing had been sitting. In the early morning traffic, 4 vehicles had gone through. The drop to the river is 60 feet. I parked on the shoulder and ran. I know that doesn't make sense, but I ran. I got to the barrier at the edge of the collapse and looked down at the river. Shallow, which made it worse, not better. 1 car on its side in the water. A pickup nose down against a concrete piling, the cab folded in on itself in a way that told me everything I didn't want to know. A man in the current, screaming, fighting. Someone beside me went over the railing with a rope before I could react, and I grabbed the other end and held it until the fire crew arrived and took it from me. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped it twice. 3 people didn't come out of the water. 6 more were hospitalized. The structural report released 4 months later cited decades of undetected corrosion in the east support assembly, specifically the arch tower, where it had been sitting for 3 nights. I've turned every explanation over. A bird with that wingspan doesn't exist in this part of the country. An optical illusion doesn't track your headlights with its eyes. And nothing I can name produces its own red light in the dark. Whatever it was, it knew. It sat on that bridge and watched the traffic below and knew what was coming for that east span. It didn't warn anyone. It didn't stop anything. It just watched until it happened, and then it was gone. I drive 40 extra minutes now to stay off Route 9, every single day. I don't think I'd feel any different even if they rebuilt the bridge from the ground up. I've worked coal for 16 years. Started underground at 22. Moved to surface operations after a roof fall in 2014 put me in a hospital bed for 6 weeks with 2 crushed vertebrae and a fractured orbital. After that, my wife sat me down and we had the conversation, and I moved to surface crew, running the elevator, doing structural checks, handling the equipment that gets men in and out of the ground. I still know every man who goes down on my shift by name. The number 7 shaft goes 1,100 feet. I worked the 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. surface rotation. First time I saw it was a Thursday morning in October, still full dark when I arrived at 5:45 for pre-shift checks. Walking across the yard toward the headframe, the tall structure over the shaft opening, I looked up and stopped. Something was perched on the crown, 30 feet up, where the wheel housing sits above the shaft. Wings folded against a body that was upright, head angled downward toward the yard below. Red eyes, self-lit, looking down at me specifically, or at least that's how it felt. I stood in the dark and looked up at it for a full minute before the shift supervisor called my name from across the yard. When I looked back up, it was gone. I mentioned it to the supervisor. He asked how late I'd been up. I told him what I saw, and he gave me the look that means the conversation is over. Second morning, I brought binoculars. It was there before I was. I got the binoculars on it, and the detail I remember most, the detail I've never been able to stop seeing, is the hands. Where the wing joints bent, what should have been feathers had something closer to fingers. Long, dark, folded around the structure with the deliberateness of something that grips, not roosting, holding on. Third morning, I told 2 other guys. They came in early with me. One of them, Garrett, 28, 2 kids, one of the best men I've ever worked alongside, said he'd been seeing something on the headframe for the past week and hadn't said anything because of how it would sound. The 3 of us stood in the dark and watched it together until the sun broke the ridge and the yard filled with people. We went to the superintendent. He listened, asked if any of us had been drinking, and told us to get to work. Wednesday, I was running a parts inventory in the surface equipment shed when the ground moved. A vibration you feel in your chest before you hear anything. And then the sound. A low, sustained crack from deep below, and a secondary collapse that hit my sternum like a fist. The number 3 entry had given way at 1,100 feet. 22 men on that section of the shift. I was the first surface worker at the shaft opening. I helped run the elevator down twice before the structural team stopped us. I was there when they brought the first men up through the dark. I won't describe what a roof fall at 1,100 feet does to a man. I've tried and I can't finish the sentence. I'll say that of the 22 men on that entry, 9 came up alive, and 5 of those were airlifted with injuries that changed their lives permanently. I watched all of it happen from 30 feet away, and I have not slept a full night since that morning. Garrett didn't come up. He'd been transferred to that entry rotation 3 days before the collapse. 3 days before, which means he was assigned there the same week we all started seeing it on the headframe. The investigation cited long deteriorating support structures in the number 3 entry, flagged in a prior inspection, and not adequately addressed. The headframe itself was inspected as part of the broader review. The inspector noted unusual scoring on the metal at the crown, marks consistent with something large gripping the same spots repeatedly over an extended period. I gave a statement about what we'd seen. The investigator wrote it down and didn't ask a single follow-up question. 3 nights. It sat on top of that headframe above the shaft opening and looked down at the yard and at the men going underground below it. On the 4th day, the number 3 entry gave way and took 13 men with it. I don't know if it knew, or if it came because it knew, or if something in its nature draws structural failure toward it wherever it lands. I've spent 2 years turning all 3 possibilities over. None of them are any more comforting than the others. My brother Danny and I talked on the phone 4 times a week, minimum. 2 years apart, grew up sharing a room, lived 20 minutes from each other as adults. He ran project management for a commercial construction firm, spent his days walking job sites, reading blueprints, arguing with subcontractors. Good at his work, sharp and careful. The kind of guy who never cut corners because he'd seen what corners looked like when they were cut. He called me at 10:30 p.m. on a Wednesday night. He sounded unsettled in a way I hadn't heard from him in years. Not frightened exactly, but the way a person sounds when something has made them question what they know. He'd been at his current job site after hours finishing a punch list, and walking back to his truck, he'd looked up at the crane tower on the east side of the building and seen something. Large, he said. Too large for a bird. Wings folded against a body shaped more like a person than anything else. Two eyes, red, lit from within, not catching the light from his truck but producing their own glow. It had looked at him for 30 seconds and then been gone. I told him it was probably a large owl, light reflecting off its eyes in an unusual way. Told him he'd been working too many long days. He laughed and said, "Yeah, probably." And we moved on to other things, and I hung up around midnight and went to bed. His wife called me at 7 a.m. Danny had been on site by 6:30. The fourth floor of the structure, steel frame with partial concrete decking still under construction, had suffered a progressive collapse. A connection point on the eastern section failed and pulled 3 levels of decking into the footprint of the floors below. Danny had been on the fourth floor reviewing the morning work plan when it went. I was there in 40 minutes. I got through the perimeter, and I was there when they pulled him out of the debris, and I am not going to say more than that except that I was there, and I have had to find a way to keep living afterward. In the weeks after, in the specific fog that follows sudden violent loss, I kept coming back to the phone call. What he'd described on the crane tower, the east side of the building, the same section where the collapse initiated, the connection point on the east frame, directly below the crane tower where he'd seen it perched. It had been on his building, looking down at the structure, the night before it came apart. He'd called to tell me about it, and I told him it was an owl. I started going back through my memory then, really going back, years, and I found 3 other moments where I'd seen or heard something that I'd written off in the moment. The night before my father's accident in 2009, driving home late, something large crossing the road ahead and landing on an overpass, and I'd thought bird and kept driving. My father was killed on that same road the next morning. A night in 2014 when Danny had mentioned in passing that he'd seen something strange perched on a building and laughed about it. My uncle had a fatal heart attack the following afternoon, alone at his desk. 15 years. I found 4 instances when I went looking carefully. I don't know what it is or why it comes or whether it causes these things or simply knows about them in advance and comes to watch. I don't know if it's drawn to structural failures specifically or to death in any form. I don't know if knowing about it changes anything, if Danny had canceled the next morning, if my father had taken a different road, if any of it would have turned out differently. I think about the phone call constantly. He was shaken enough to call me the same night, and I told him it was an owl. The most rational explanation I had, and I gave it to him, and he accepted it because that's what you do when someone gives you a rational explanation and you want to believe it. I keep coming back to one specific thing he said before we hung up. He said it was the eyes that got him, that they were looking at him like they already knew something he didn't. He was right. Whatever it was, it knew exactly what that building was going to do in the morning. It came to watch the last night it was still standing.